hello everyone. Thanks a lot for coming here today. My name is Tatiana Vilela dos Santos. I'm a game designer and interactive artist based here in Paris. I work sometimes as a freelancer, but mainly I create playful experiences with my interactive multimedia project called MechBird. I started to do this in 2012, and well, I'd say my job is mainly somewhere between psychology and engineering. It's a mix of these two things. I also teach human-computer interactions in different universities here in France. And so for the coming minutes, I'll make a retrospective of all my exhibited works. So what I'm doing are basically games. But my games are not sold online or in shops. They are meant to be played at events, in venues and festivals. And the stuff I'm making usually have physical interfaces like this black truncated pyramid. It's called Blackbox. And I will tell you a bit how I made each of my games and what were the frustrations and desires that led me to do it, back to the initial one that led me to start MechBird. So let's start with the first game. I hope it'll help other designers to find their own creative path to see all this game I made. So the last game I made is called Negemu. It was made in an art residency in Tunisia a few months ago, and they gave me carte blanche to make a game of my choice. And I started judo a few years ago, and it was really life-changing for me. You know, when you have a very intellectual work, you sometimes forget that you have a body. So I wanted to encourage my players to reconnect with their body in some way. So I made this game. It's a competitive game for 2 players, played on the floor, on mats. There are 2 snakes projected on the floor. I will remove the cursor. Sorry for that. At each round, the system will highlight 2 buttons, a red one and a blue one. One of the players is blue, the other one is red. The first player to press the button of his color will bite his opponent's tail. You can see there are 2 snakes here. The point is to eat his opponent's hole, of course. And so, yeah, what I wanted to do with this game was to kind of give a safe space for my players to experiment with their body. And when I say a safe space, I'm not only talking about their physical safety, obviously, but also the social environment in which they are playing. In this game, you're not allowed to roll on the floor, to touch the body of the other player. It's required by the system. So what I'm doing is not only games. I see it as designing social spaces with new rules to interact with other people. And using playfulness to trigger a kind of awareness to your own body and to the environment is something I'm doing quite often in my games. It's also something I did with my previous game. This game is called Contre-ciel, so it's in French, obviously. It's a game I also made in art residency, this time at the Shadok. It's in Strasbourg, in the east of France. And so they also gave me a free rein to make a game of my choice. And it was a really big deal for me because it was my first solo exhibit, so I had a lot of pressure with this game. So basically, Contre-ciel is an interactive artificial sky that you can control with a keyboard, a musical keyboard. You can change the weather, the night and day cycles, and the planet from which you look at the sky, depending on what you are playing on the keyboard. And this kind of game is what I call a Rosetta Stone to explore. So basically, the rules to interact are hidden, and players got to figure them out. And What I like, so I love to do this kind of puzzle games, the Rosetta Stones to explore, because players will come with their previous background in life. So for a concrete example, usually in this game, engineers will first look at the plug behind the keyboard to see if it's based on audio signal or MIDI, and try to understand how the game is working based on that, while people with musical background, musical theory background, will usually first see if minor and major scales have a different influence on the sky. And this is why I love to make this kind of game. It feeds superstitions. It feeds, belief. So this is a kind of puzzle game I love to design. And what I was really interested into with Contreciel was to displace, shift the goal of the game. Usually, you can be stressed by the fact of playing music in front of other people. And so by putting an artificial sky connected to the keyboard, players are less stressed, less pressured, because people are focused on the sky, on the game, and not on the sound space anymore. And this is something I also did with my previous work, L'Atlas des Matrices. So with this work, I also tried to displace the game's goal. So L'Atlas des Matrices is not a game. It's related to a game I made. The game in question, in this case, is Dead Pixels. So it's a game where you have to conquer territories by painting a digital canvas. And so at the end of each game, you have this kind of nice graphic compositions that emerges from the game. And so I'm going to leap back in time to tell a bit how Dead Pixels is working, because it will make all this work way clearer. So Dead Pixels is a game I made for an association in the north of France called Sésame. It's related to the game company Ankama. Anyway, so they have events sometimes, and they wanted something that they could show during their events. So I made them a multiplayer game playable by 2 to 9 players. In team, 3 teams. Each one has a color, the yellow, the magenta, and the cyan. And each player has a joystick that allows him to move a squared avatar on a digital canvas. By doing so, it will paint the canvas. It leaves a trail behind the avatar. When closed shapes are drawn, they automatically fill themselves, a bit like the bucket in Photoshop or Paint. And when you mix colors, it produces black dead pixels. It's an irreversible state. And so by the end of the game, the team with the more covered areas win the game. So this is how Dead Pixels is working. And with this game, what I really wanted was for the players to be interacting with each other. So much that I made the first version really big, but then made a smaller one so people would get really close to each other. So yeah, this was for Dead Pixels. Let's get back to L'Atlas des Matrices. So L'Atlas des Matrices is a slideshow of all of screenshots taken at each Dead Pixels endgames. Or more precisely, Dead Pixels Squared. It's a version of the game played with real gamepads and projected on a real canvas, put on an easel, because I wanted, to emphasize the painting experience. And so, why did I do this? Well, I wanted this scenography to trigger new behaviors in my players, and it kind of worked. Of course, else I wouldn't be talking about it. And so, yeah, people started to draw, to cooperate, to draw together, instead of playing the game, the competitive game intended in the first place. And so this is the kind of thing I like to do, triggering behaviors with an environment. It's kind of my specialty, and it's something I started to do really early in my career, when I realized how much exhibited games are played differently than, the regular one. But it really reached a pinnacle when I started to make games with performers. So the last game I made with performers is Intact. I made this game when a friend of mine heard about me doing stuff with performers, and he knew a choreographer that wanted to experiment with interactions and digital arts in general. And so he offered me to invest in a bay in the south of France. So what I did was I had this big room in an abbey, and I covered the ceiling with wadding and put LED strips above it. Players can touch the sky, and it will change the local weather of the sky. But again, it's a Rosetta Stone to explore, so I don't give them any instructions, obviously. Instead, there are 2 dancers inside the installations that are not allowed to speak, but by dancing, they got to help players to figure out how the stuff is working. And basically, you could say they are living NPCs, living non-playing characters, like the one in games that gives you quests and stuff like this. So this is how Intact is working. And it's all based on really common material, plastic material. And the reason for that is that I love to work with common materials because well, high technologies, we expect them to behave in a way we don't understand, or to do weird, impressive stuff, while common materials are not expected to behave that way. So it gives a sense of wonder to the players, a sense of magic that, for me, high technologies sometimes cannot reach, not really reach. So yeah, it's fully based on common plastic material. So what I wanted to do with Intact is for the performance and the game to happen in the same space. And this is something I already did in 2015 with a performance called Bows. So what I really wanted to do with this one was to break the verticality of the stage-audience relationship. So back then, my roommate was a DJ, and one of my best friends is a VJ/shader artist, and I don't think he's here, or maybe he's here. Leon, yeah, so he's one of the guys I made this with, a wonderful shader artist. And so I wanted for this DJ, my roommate back then, and Leon, to work all together on something. And back then, I was working a lot in Parisian clubs, because my games were matching the mood. And the thing is, I wanted the audience to interact with us, but from what I observed, usually in a club, clubbers already kind of interact with the DJ. They dance depending on what he's mixing, and he's supposed to mix depending on what is the mood of the crowd. So I decided to focus more on the video and to point a camera toward the dance floor and take the video stream of the people dancing and feed it to Leon. And so he made VJing stuff out of these dancing body parts. And what was really interesting is that, so for example, you had kaleidoscopes and twirls and stuff like this. And usually what people would do, for example, when the kaleidoscope was displayed, is that they put themselves on the side of the camera's field, put only their arms, made wave with it, and so it looked like this kind of Indian dance with a lot of arms. And people started to cooperate together. So when someone was starting to make the Indian dance, someone else, a stranger, would come and does the same. And triggering this kind of spontaneous cooperation is something that I really love to do, and I'm really eager to trigger in my games. It's something I did for Junglein. It's a game I made for the same association I told you about, the one for which I made Dead Pixels. And in Junglein, so it was at La Nuit des Arts in the north of France anyway, I wanted people to be immersed in a kind of electronic jungle. So this is a room filled with LED lianas, and you can unplug the lianas and plug them together, and basically it's based on a contagion mechanic. So the animation of one liana will be conveyed to another one if you plug the male plug to the female one. And so it's basically a kind of giant puzzle game. You got to sync all the animation and all the colors. And I really wanted people not to be immersed in a digital magic space behind the screen, but to bring the magic, the digital magic, outside the screen and put it around the players. That's something I really wanted to do with Junglein. And this is because I really wanted to break free from the traditional video game format. A computer, a screen, and speakers, a user, the traditional video game format. And this is also something I tried to do with Magnesia. So Magnesia is a game made in an art residency in Berlin called The Brain. It's really a wonderful residency. They bring together a Polish, a German, and a French artist, people that don't know each other, and they have few weeks to make something together that will then be exhibited at the Amaze Festival. It's a fun weird indie game festival in Berlin. Anyway, so we wanted to make something that is fully analog, and we made this game without any computer or screen. It's fully based on magnetic and electrical properties. So in this game, you have 2 to 8 players, blue team versus a red team. And each player has a cylinder made of plastic and filled with neodymium. It's basically a rare earth with really strong magnetic properties. It's basically a really strong magnet. And they can move metal balls that are between layers of acrylic glass. There are 5 balls, and each team has 3 circular targets, and they have to put a ball on each of their targets. So this game is fully based on electrical and magnetic properties. There is not even a PCB in that. Well, at least not even an Arduino board. There is a PCB. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to break free from the video game format with Magnesia and Junglein is that for 2 years before that, I explored the medium, the video game medium, but while still staying inside the boundaries. I pushed the envelope, but you know, I wasn't really breaking free from the format. But still, I made some attempts to do it, and most of my attempt was by doing alternative controllers for my game, stuff like Blackbox. And here is another example with GPU. So GPU is another game I made with Leon. Yeah, I made a lot of games with that guy up there. And so in this game, it's a puzzle game. At the beginning, the players can upload an image. It will be then altered by shaders. And each shader will be randomly assigned to one of the buttons on this messy controller. And players have to figure out what button is related to what effect. So in this game, I made what I did with a lot of my games. I put the challenge of my games not inside the digital part, but outside the digital part. Here, if the controller wasn't that messy, the game wouldn't exist. And this is something I did a lot, you know, doing stuff that are not designed for ergonomics or comfort of use in mind, but kind of anti-ergonomics in some way. So yeah, this is something I love to do with my game. And the point of the player in this game is to fix the glitches, of course, of the image. It's quite obvious. And usually, I do my own physical interfaces, but there is one game I couldn't do that with it, and this is because in 2015, 2 Germans I've never heard of sent me a mail to ask me if I was OK to make a 48-hour game jam with them in front of Arte's camera. So Arte is a German and French TV channel. And as I like adventure, I said yes, but I really didn't know what I was getting into. And it happened to be a wonderful week we spent together. It's not about bad story. But basically, I had this constraint that we would make a game that would be available online for everyone to play. So I wasn't able to make my own physical interface for it. So what I did is that I kind of hacked or misused a keyboard, and I made this game called Snailed It. So in Snailed It, it's a game a competitive game for 3 players, and all the players share a same avatar and keyboard. So at the beginning, you have this snail in the middle of a graph, and all the nearest nodes to the snail are displaying a letter. And if you press the related letter key, it will push the snail towards it. And each player has the goal to lead the snail to an end of its color. And what is interesting here is that the tension is not so much on the controller than in between the digital and physical space. Players have to go back and forth between the digital and physical space to elbow their way on the keyboard. So finally, Blackbox does stuff. Well, I say finally, but there are still some games. So when I say I wanted to put the tension, the challenge of my game on the keyboard, on the controller, this is because for me, playing is always somehow messing around with attention. You know, when I do judo, I'm kind of playing with this tension that is gravity, and if I'm making a lock on someone's arm, well, I'm playing with the tension on his joints. And I think where a designer, and especially a game designer, is putting the tension of his game is actually quite betraying his way of seeing games. And, well, Blackbox is no exception. So this Blackbox was, it's funny, it was made as a Christmas gift in the first place for one of the developers I worked a lot with. This guy is called Olivier Drouet. He's not here today, but still, he's a wonderful guy. Love you, Olivier. And so, yeah, in Blackbox, we wanted for the players to have a really percussive experience. So it's basically made for a rhythm game, something kind of between Simon and Guitar Hero. And so, yeah, again, it's something we designed with not ergonomics and comfort of use in mind, but with how to provide a percussive experience to the player in mind. And the reason I'm doing my physical interfaces, all this stuff I'm making, is that doing my own physical interfaces for my game allow me to explore the physical part of the game experience. And I started to be really interested into that just a few months after starting MechBird. And this is because I quickly asked myself the question, why am I making games that are meant to be exhibited? I mean, I could make games that are sold online, so why doing it? And the answer was, and is still, that I wanted for people to be connected. And Jeu de Main was made exactly in this, with this purpose in mind. So Jeu de Main is a game for 4 players, and it's based on a black cotton dome with 4 mouth-shaped holes. Players have to put their arm inside each hole, and inside there is a there are fist-sized galleries. It's a maze, and people need to grab the hand of their partner while preventing their opponents from doing so. So obviously, what I wanted to do with this game was to connect people, to bring them together. And it was also something I did for my previous game, Atsuno. So both Jeu de Main and Atsuno were made during a wonderful game jam called the Zoo Machine. Back then it was called the Art Game Weekend. And the point of this game jam is to question the video game medium. And so what I wanted to do for both of these games was to bring the game, the video game, outside the screen, make people play in the physical space. And well, Atsuno is my most exhibited game so far. I exhibited a lot this game in clubs. So it's basically a game of Twister, kind of like a Twister. So it's a cooperative game for 2 players. Each player has a wearable controller with 5 boxes, 1 on each arm, 1 on each leg, and 1 on the stomach. And in each box, you have an arcade button and an LED. And players have to press all of their partner's lead button simultaneously. So it's basically, yeah, a kind of electronic cooperative Twister played while standing and on the body of the other player. This is the best pitch I can give of Atsuno, I guess. And the reason I made Atsuno and all these games involving the bodies of the players is that I'm quite fascinated by how players' bodies are involved in an experience. And this really started in 2013 when I was conducting researches in design and HCI, human-computer interactions, in universities, first in Montpellier 3 in the south of France, and then at La Sorbonne. So back then, I was conducting researches on interfaces that are perceptible but intangible. So basically stuff that you can see but not touch, like light or smoke. And I made this game fully based on light, directly for this purpose. And my big problem, let's say problem, was how can I make an accurate controller out of something that is intangible? It's the kind of puzzle I like to solve as a designer. And so, yeah, this game is Oort. It's a game played with 2 boxes with a light bar inside of it and a light sensor. And on the screen, you have this kind of pod racer-like spaceship. And each of the engine is running on light. So if the player is covering the light inside the box with his hand, the related pod will fall down because obviously it's running on light. And so then you have all these scraps coming your way faster and faster in this hypnotic geometric space, so it's kind of psychedelic I guess, in some way. And so it's basically a game of coordination. And the reason for that is that I love coordination. So I made 2 games, well, 3 games with coordination. And this is because I first started MechBird to challenge players in their mind. I wanted to mind blow them. I wanted to well, you got it. I wanted to mind mess them. and yeah, the thing is, coordination is the most basic challenge I found that is, about mind-body relation in this mind-body connection. The most basic thing I could challenge was that. So as I wanted to challenge their perception and cognition, I made 2 games about it. The second one is Tetra. It's a game, again, made with Leon, and the last one. And so basically in this game, you have a kind of one-eyed octopus in the background and some tongues along the screen frame. And it's played with 4 fingers. Each of your finger is related to one of the tongue. And your point is to eat the crawling worms coming your way, to dilate the pupil of the one-eyed octopus. Yes, the innuendo is clearly intended. And you have to do so before it falls asleep. The thing is, at each level, the position of the tongue is less and less related to the one of your finger, so it progressively becomes a real mess to play. The first game I made about coordination is Izokun. So Izokun is a game of synchronization and coordination, and it's based on a simple alternative controller. You have 4 buttons, a black one, a white one, a black one with a white outline, and a white one with a black outline. And you have 4 2D nested geometries, and along each line you have a dot that is moving automatically. And each dot is visually related to one of the buttons. So pressing on the buttons will speed up or slow down the related dots. The point of the player is to sync the race of all the dots for a full turn. But of course, at each level, the geometries becomes more and more complex. So it's harder and harder to do so. So let's finally come to the first game I made with MechBird. It's Lachi. And so my, initial purpose, as I told you, is to mind mess with the players. And the reason for that is that back then, in 2012, I had a job as a game designer, and I was kind of living the dream of any freshly graduated game design students, and yet I kind of felt frustrated and felt ungrateful for feeling frustrated. But I didn't want to serve the players what they expected as an experience, on a silver plate. I wanted to surprise them. And so this is the reason that really led me to start MechBird in the first place. So I made Lachi. It's a 3D digital maze based on optical illusions and visual alterations. But mainly, in this game, players must mistrust the system. You need to transgress to progress in this game. So for example, at the beginning, you have a rose showing you the path, but if you follow them, you will just find yourself walking in circles. So you got to mistrust the system for that. So this is the kind of game I really wanted to do, and this is why I started MechBird in the first place. But to get really even precise about my reason to start MechBird, I think I should come back on the reasons I gave when I first entered my game design school. So when I entered my game design school, I've been asked, why do you want to enter our school, BASIC? And I answered that I wanted to share my escapist fantasies. And as a single child, I daydreamed a lot. I still do. And I wanted to share this very personal experience. And I thought that designing interactive experiences would be the best way to do so. The thing is, I think it's the first time in my life that I actually built a bridge between design and art, or at least what it is for me. You know, the objectivity required to design an experience for someone else to live, and the subjectivity of actually living this experience in my mind. And this is what MechBird is for me. You know, something both organic and mechanical, something that helps me find a kind of balance between opposite things. And it's, a kind of tension in itself and a way of playing for me. So this talk comes at its end. You can find all my coming exhibits online. Usually they are free, so it's cool. You can find it on my agenda on my website, MechBird.fr. If you have questions, you can find me somewhere in the venue, probably at the bar, let's be honest. And you can drop me a tweet if you want. But mainly, if you are designers or not and want to know more about the tools and methods I use to design this kind of game, I have a blog online on Gamma Sutra, and I made a long series of articles called Game Design Beyond Screens and Joysticks that really gets into detail of it. So thanks a lot for your attention. Take care and be playful.